Okay, good evening, everyone. I think you can all hear me. Welcome to our final fall chapel chat. This is our final of the 4 evenings that we spent together with Father Steve. My name is Anne-Marie Scorzo. I'm with the OLM Cornerstone team. I know many of you have been praying for my sister Lisa, so I just want to say that she's coming along nicely with her eye infection, and my family is very grateful for everyone's prayers. So thank you. Our final topic this evening is matrimony, divorce, and remarriage. And again, I think all of these topics have been topics that we're interested in, topics that maybe we feel we don't know enough about and would like to know more. And this is certainly one of them. Many of us are married, some of us are divorced, and perhaps in another relationship, or perhaps remarried. I know that at my home church, the pastor there will not give communion to anyone that he is aware of that is divorced and either remarried or in a relationship where he has personal knowledge that it might not be in line with what the church teaches. And I just know, I personally think to myself, is this the right thing? Some of those people have left, individuals and couples have left that parish. I say, well, they're coming to Mass. What would Jesus do? How many others are in that very same situation at that Mass that maybe we're not aware of? So again, it's one of those topics. And so we're grateful to Father Steve that he shares his wisdom and his knowledge with us, so that as practicing Catholics that we know more, we have knowledge, and we can defend the church and we can be comfortable. So we're going to begin with an opening prayer, but while you're listening to Father Steve, just keep in mind and formulate any comments or questions that maybe you would like to share when Father Steve is through speaking. So in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Dear God, we come together as a community to be attentive, to listen, and to share. We look to you and to your loving Son, Jesus, to keep our hearts open and our minds clear. Lord, we thank you. We're thankful for Father Steve and his willingness to share his thoughts with us. Tonight, as we focus on our topic of matrimony, divorce, and remarriage, bless our marriages with peace and happiness. Help us to be more understanding of each other's weaknesses and failings, and when our hearts have been torn, guide us in faith to trust you, our merciful and loving God, who gives us all that we need. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you. You get this coat off first of all in this book right here. Well, scriptures. Okay, so marriage. Oddly enough, all these talks, have focused on Genesis. Really the first text of the Bible, but anyway, and that's where we'll begin again. So in Genesis, you know, in the first account of Genesis, that's Genesis 1, it says at the very end of it, God created them male and female. Let us make man in our own image, male and female, and this isn't on, I can tell. Male and female, let us make them in our own image. In the second story of Genesis, chapter 2, and I've mentioned that there are multiple stories of creation in the scriptures, and why. But anyway, in the second story, it says that God created Adam, and that Adam was alone, and that he says, it is not good that man should be alone. Let us make him a helpmate. And he creates Eve. He takes a rib from Adam who was asleep, and he takes Eve. Now that story holds a whole ton of theology for us. And if I stop losing these papers, honestly, goodness, I'm telling you. Okay. Adam is created as a man. Both in the first and in the second story of creation, he's created male. Therefore, if we, leaving from the first and into the second, we can say that Adam is missing something. Maleness wants femaleness. He's not complete in himself. He cannot complete his own identity, that his maleness is looking for the femaleness. And therefore, the first thing that God is telling us is that marriage is between a man and a woman. He does not create any other creature for Adam. He does not create. In fact, he gives him a choice. Choose all the animals you want and find a suitable helpmate, we're told, in the second story of creation. And it says that Adam gave names to all the creatures of the earth, all the wild reptiles and the birds of the air. But he found no suitable helpmate until Eve appears. Then he says, at last, bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. That is a direct revelation by God. That marriage is intended to be between a male and a female. Now, by the very fact that he only creates Eve and not 3 Eves, 4 Eves, 5 Eves, it tells us that marriage is an exclusive relationship. It is between this man and this woman, and it's going to be lifelong. Because they are at the origin, in the scriptures, they are at the origin of the human race. There's no other choice. If you want to back up to this, go to the story of Noah. Noah is told to take on the ark 2 pairs of everything so that they can regenerate the earth. But as for himself, he has only his wife, himself, and his children. In other words, Adam has no other woman to choose from, neither does Noah in the recreation. God is hammering home something to us. It's male and female, and it's a lifelong relationship. So, we'll get into the marriage as what are the ingredients of marriage. Marriage is a total, free gift of the self to another. So it's total free gift, and therefore comes the exclusivity, or that there should be not a third party. Now, the total is easy to understand. The exclusive is easy to understand, that God didn't create anyone else for Adam. It was easy. He doesn't get to choose from another a slew of women, you know. He doesn't say, I'll take the hussy down the street also. She's not there. Right. This precludes whether God created millions of human beings at the beginning or just Adam and Eve. That's not important. It's in the Revelation, he has only Adam and Eve. Yes, he could have had multiple pairs of human beings or multiple human beings. But Adam, we are told, has only Eve. Reiterated in the Noah story, reiterated throughout the scriptures. However, the theology of the body itself, which John Paul II was big on, tells us about this. So in the theology of the body, John Paul II rightly pointed out that what our spirits do, our bodies should follow. And what our bodies do should be in sync with our spirits. So we often claim that, you know, the Catholics are always sitting, kneeling, standing, sitting, kneeling, standing, sitting. Well, there's a reason for that. We sit to listen, we kneel to adore, we stand because we are children of God. And all these actions of our body correspond to our own inner selves, our spirits. So that if I give myself to another woman, I say, my heart is yours, my life is yours, my energies are yours, and she does the same to me, I have no freedom to give them to someone else. I've given the totality of myself to someone else. So marriage is a total, free gift of self to others, and therefore exclusive and lifelong. That's the definition of marriage in the Catholic Church. It is between a male and a female, because this is what we see in creation. And on the natural order of things, it only makes sense on the natural order. So, some problems here, hopefully without getting into too much detail, but on the natural order of things, marriage has three elements: pleasure, or companionship; unity, one flesh, the total gift of self to another; and procreation. That procreation, all three of them must be present for a true marriage. That procreation, the possibility of all three of them must be there. That procreative is what's going to exclude all other forms of marriage that we hear about today. Because every human being, by God's own design, is to be conceived in love, in an act of love. As the origin is supposed to be two human beings. So, in other words, brothers and sisters, the egg, the ovum, is looking for a sperm. The sperm has no purpose without the egg. The egg has no purpose without the sperm. And to bring it quite down to those terms, one of the elements would be missing if that couldn't happen, if it wasn't even possible. And that's what excludes other forms of marriage that we have today. Certainly, absolutely. So marriage is exclusive, lifelong, total gift of self to each other. Okay, now, I go back to the natural theology. What my body says, my spirit should say. So with my body, I'm giving myself to another. Here I am, and here you are. And we offer ourselves to each other. But if I withhold any part of my body, I'm withholding some of my heart. And that's the problem with premarital sex and contraceptive sex and all that sort of thing, is that I withhold something. I say, I'm completely yours, but not this, which is a lie, which John Paul II called lying with your body. Not with words, but with your body. You're withholding things. And you're saying you can have everything but my fertility. That you can't have. Well, then you're not giving me the total existence of yourself. This is a problem for modern men, admittedly, because we do not have an organic life anymore. Oh, we want organic wheat, and we want organic cereals, and we want organic this and organic that, but we don't want to be who we are as we are. We don't accept that, and so we manipulate. Perhaps we'll get into manipulation a little bit later, because it can be good and bad. But in the non-manipulative state, I come and you come, we come as fertile men and fertile women, preceding the fall of mankind, which brings in a whole slew of problems. We come as fertile men and fertile women, as part of our identity, as who we are. And when I offer myself to you, it's with that. And to try and exclude that is a lie. It's not who I am. I'm presenting you to someone else other than I am. So in the scriptures, it's clear that by God not creating someone else for Adam, that he has only Eve to choose from, and only Eve to live with. That it's a lifelong, total, and of course, open to life because male and female, he created them, where they could find the reason for being male and female. Why would you be female? Why would you be male if there wasn't a reason for it? There is. So open to children. On the natural law, of course, it is the same thing. So under the scriptures, under the natural law, the sperm looks for an egg, the egg is looking for a sperm. They can't find their fulfillment in any other way, unless the two get together, therefore. Which, again, I have in the back of my mind, manipulation. I know it can happen other ways. But manipulation isn't always good. We'll see, maybe. Now, after the scriptural text on marriage, we have also the teachings of the church. So the long-standing teachings of the church are that marriage is between a man and a woman in a total, free, self-giving act that results in life. Total, free, and fruitful is the way they say it. That is backed up by the teachings of the church, or it flows from the teachings of the church that it should be backed up. And that is that the teachings of the church from early times right down to now is that there are 7 sacraments, one of which is marriage. And marriage is defined as the union between a man and a woman. For become one flesh, companionship, or sometimes you hear it as pleasure, and procreativity, or life. That sacrament is dogma. It will never change. Therefore, we know absolutely from the church, as Roman Catholics, what we believe is that marriage is between a man and a woman in a self-giving that is for life, that is open to new life, and that is the definition of marriage in the Catholic Church. And I'm sure I'm throwing out information and you have a slew of questions, and I'm hoping for those questions actually tonight. Now, to the question of divorce. So we know what marriage is, the total free self-gift of ourselves to another and others to myself. In a relationship, therefore, that is lifelong, exclusive, open to life. If I give myself totally, how can I give myself to someone else? Adultery is out. Second marriages or third marriages, or what we call polygamy, is out. How can I give myself totally to you and totally to you? It's impossible. And open to life. Now, let's get into divorce. Because I know these talks have to be short, so I'm trying to run you through them. Divorce is a result of the fall. And a lot of things are a result of the fall, unfortunately. And they are here. What is divorce? Divorce is, at its best, a recognition of the inability of two people to cohabitate. And it may be necessary for many reasons. And so the church even admits that divorce, especially civil divorce to protect yourselves, is not a bad thing. It could be a very good thing, especially if one or other or both of you are abusive to each other. You would have to get it. This calls to mind whether or not the marriage was a marriage. And so, when we get to marriage, Jesus Christ has a curious information. In the beginning, God created the male and female, he says, in responding to their question. And therefore, the two become one flesh, and what God has joined, no man must be separated. And he adds a caveat, unless the union was illicit from the beginning. And that's where we get what we call annulments. If the bond is true in the beginning, if both partners truly love one another, the church is not free to say you can remarry. She can't dissolve that bond. Nobody can, because it's an eternal bond created by God. But if we can prove, and this is where annulments come in, we try to prove that the bond was never created by God, because one or both of you lack something, then divorce becomes possible. And that allows for remarriage. Because we can say, here, so-and-so did not have the necessary requirements to enter into marriage, therefore could not enter into marriage. You went through the ritual, you went through the party, you had the house, you had the kids, you had all that, but one of you was lacking essential ingredients. And it eventually showed up as inability to live together, and you had to separate and push yourselves apart. That we call an annulment. If the annulment can be granted, and if the annulment, in other words, the marriage was valid at the beginning, then we can still allow for divorce for protection of the persons or persons involved. But we cannot allow for the remarriage, and there's a big difference. One, the bond is invalid, the person is free to remarry. The other, the bond is valid, the person is not free to remarry unless the other dies because the vow is until life do us unto death, until life until death. And marriage is an earthly reality only, so that's why it is unto death. So for annulments, we need to gather the information, not lie, but gather the information and see if we have a cause for the separation. X, Y, or Z. And there, believe me, nowadays, more than ever, there are more legitimate divorces out there than there are marriages. Unfortunately, we just don't take marriage seriously enough as to what it really is. What happened to my water? You know who's not here?
Jennifer.
Thank you. But anyway, so, now, for an annulment, there are a whole host of causes. But for a divorce and a remarriage to happen, it has to be proven that the bond was never created. And that happens a lot more often than you think, folks. A lot of folks enter the marriage ill-prepared, immature, under-equipped. And that's why the church has a lot of annulments. And it's by Jesus Christ's own words. So, if you want, I can get into divorce, but anyway, the causes of it. But marriage is a lifelong, total gift of myself to another who makes the same commitment to me. If one or other or both are not making that same commitment, we do not have a bond. We do not have a lifelong commitment. Even though you stood before the altar, you said the words, you had the party, you bought the house, you had the kids, and oftentimes it shows up many years later, but it should have unfortunately been happening at the very start. But it shows up and the bond was invalid. If the bond was valid, now let me give you a case where you might understand what I'm talking about, where the bond might be valid. X and Y proposed marriage to each other. Good. X and Y are in love with each other. X and Y want nothing other than to give themselves completely to each other. And they marry. X at work gets hit by a beam from unloading a truck in his head and becomes an unbearably violent human being, such that Y can no longer live with X. It is post-marriage irreparable, but makes living cohabitation impossible. What the church will do is say, at the time of the marriage, your love was valid. We can't dissolve that bond, but we can admit that you need to dissolve this union civilly for your own protection and for your kids' protection, because X has now become violent, unmanageable, incurably unmanageable. You need to put X aside. But you must live out your marriage vows. You can't remarry. You must pray for X and all that sort of thing. Remain celibate and chaste, because it was valid at the beginning. Now, let's go to the divorce case. X and Y propose marriage. X says they love Y completely, totally, and unselfishly. Y says the same. However, X is bipolar, X is an alcoholic, X is violent, X is damaged from his childhood or her childhood, whatever it might be. They can't create a bond. In this case, the church will dissolve that bond. Say it never existed. So it's not a dissolving of the bond as I'm using the word. We talk in those terms. It's actually a declaration that the bond never existed. God never created it. They stood here, but God knew what we didn't know. Or sometimes they all know. Or let's suppose that they settle. What we call settling is a big case for annulments. I'll never do any better. I'm getting older. I want a kid, so I'll marry X. Well, that's not very good for a marriage, is it? The bond is never created. Or immaturity. We're 14 and 16. I love you. I'll give you everything. You know, not very good for a marriage. The bond is never created. There are lots of reasons for a divorce out there, and a lot of folks who are divorced find themselves with those very, very serious and same reasons. What a lot of them don't do is go through the annulment process. What a lot of them do is remarry. And I have to tell you, a lot of them remarry unhappily. But occasionally there are the happy remarriages. That puts them in a particular situation. So that's probably the case that Anne-Marie was speaking about. And that is what we call a pastoral situation, in which it's known to the pastor. And the situations could be or could not be that they can apply or not apply for annulment. So we have a lot of times folks who come to us and say, you know, Father, I would love to get the annulment, but my ex is so violent. I'm afraid that if I apply, because we have to inform all the parties involved by law, I'm afraid my partner will take action, wreak havoc in my life. And at that case, sometimes the pastor may say, you're fine. You've told me your case. It's true, I haven't heard the other side, but I've heard enough on your side. I assume you're honest to say that you can receive Holy Communion, absolutely, and be in the church. What we do recommend is that you keep your mouth shut and don't tell everybody else that you are divorced and remarried, because it spreads it out as something that I know the circumstances of, they do not know. Nor should you be telling everyone what the circumstances are. That's unfair both to the other and to yourself. But it does happen many times that folks are afraid to apply for the annulment because of the situation. In which case the church allows for the pastoral minister, the priest or whoever's in charge there, to make a judgment, not an okay of the situation, but a judgment that at this time we've done all we could possibly do. And that is an individual by individual case. It is never to be a blanket permission in anyone, because marriage is so sacred. In other words, God creates them male and female. He gives Adam the choice of all of creation. He finds nothing that satisfies him except for Eve when she's created. And in the second story of Genesis, of course, it's only Adam and Eve. They only have each other. Whether or not there were millions of other human beings, Revelation wants to tell us these two had only each other. It is exclusive. It is to each other. It is forever, for lifelong, and open to procreation. The Noah story repeats it. The constant scriptures repeat it. Christ himself repeats it. The teachings of the church repeats it. Christ raises it to one of the sacraments. Really, we have no doubts as Catholics as to what marriage is. Those other complications come in because of the fall, and we need to deal with them. Normally, divorce is not something Catholics cannot do. It is something they can do with good reason. And then they need to apply for an annulment. Hopefully, they will find cause for an annulment, and then they are free to remarry. If they do not find cause for an annulment, they are not free to remarry. Given the fact that many of them remarry, we can understand sometimes why that happens. Given the nature of the information that many of you will not share in pew, but that the parish priest might share. It is oftentimes told to the couple that you will be admitted to Holy Communion because we understand the situation. Again, times I cannot share that with you. I know about it, but you cannot know about it. And therefore, that precludes judging anyone. You may know someone is divorced and remarried, but you may not know what I know. And so you say nothing. Okay, any questions? Good, I did a good job.
Your definition in terms of, that, it would be pleasant and unity and procreation. Does that mean if somebody doesn't have children, that they're not married? No. but the procreation part of it is a little bit what I'm trying to. And the
Yeah.
second thing is that when people go and apply for an annulment, I have had stories where people, apply to this pastor or this church and they don't get it, but they go and they pay money and, they get it at this particular church.
That's
all
impossible.
pastors are, like, how does it work?
It's impossible, yeah.
Okay, that's what I need to have clarification. How does it work? Is there like a database where the pastor knows, well, they applied and?
No, it's impossible. I'll tell you what's probably happening. First, to answer your first question, is procreation is not an absolute every time you have intimacy. It must be a possibility.
Okay, so that
So-
clarifies that.
Right, and it must be that you do not block the possibility.
Okay.
That's the openness to children that we call for. Contraceptive will be out. Well, and again, I think this should be a chapel talk for the springtime. What happens when we can manipulate nature? I mentioned the word manipulation. There are a whole slew of things out here that I'm not touching on tonight. I can if you want me to, but the procreation outside of the womb, procreation in false wombs, all this sort of thing that's going on. In the natural order and in the created order as we got from the will of God. So the will of God is in our creation, the will of God is in our church teachings, especially the fact that marriage is a sacrament. It's between a man and a woman, and it's open to life. That doesn't mean that every act is open to life, but you must be open to it. You must not try to block it, and you must not try to kill it if it occurs, abortion, okay? That is absolutely the two things that have to be out for a marriage to be valid, if you have that in your mind. Divorce is another thing. If you're gonna make a total self-commitment, the church will absolutely reject and not accept prenuptial agreements. It's already planning on a divorce. Should we get divorced, you get the art collection and I get the Ferraris. Yeah, you're already planning on a divorce in your mind. So prenuptial agreements are out. It has to be the total gift of self. Everything that I own, everything that I am, everything that I will be. So those things the church will absolutely reject, and those are causes for annulments, actually. Now, to your second question, why do some get annulments better than others? And that has to do, how do I put this on film? With the quality of the pastor, quite simply. He didn't know what he was doing. The other pastor's better. He can dig into it. So when I meet with someone who comes from an annulment, most of them are reticent about getting the annulment. They don't want it. But when I begin to dig into what happened, what was going on in the marriage, and so forth and so on, and I'm looking for causes, I always tell them we have to be honest. We can't invent a cause, but as they talk to me, I can see what's there. The other pastor may be, for whatever reason, unattended, disinterested, or not knowing what he's doing, and he can't help the couple to a cause, So there are plenty of causes that we bring with us to marriage, unfortunately, that would prohibit the bond being created by God. So the other pastor was just more studious, but he doesn't decide the annulment. The annulment is decided by the tribunal of the diocese, which has a review by another tribunal. Even in almost all cases, even in the new cases that Francis put out, there still must be a review to make sure that the church is not handing out annulments willy-nilly, because she hasn't got the power to dissolve a bond, not even a natural bond. Marriage is a natural right. It exists before the sacrament, Adam and Eve. So she hasn't got a right to dissolve a bond between two native Indians in the jungle of Brazil. If they really gave themselves each other, it's about marriage, So she has to be very careful that there really are causes and that the causes can be documented. They can be proven. And that's the other thing I've not mentioned, because it's really not about annulments, but you have to be able to show. You can't just say so-and-so was beat me, from the day one to, you have to be able to have some substantial evidence, okay? But the other priest may not have been very good at doing that. It happens a lot. It's why I'm very, very busy in the evenings. These darn priests.
Thank you.
Yes. Hey, Camille, I see.
Yes. I know from personal experience of the importance of the priest's involvement in divorce. And I know the deep research that has to go into it in order to come up with a clear conclusion of everything that's involved. Can you give us some detail of what's involved?
Yes, so when someone applies for an annulment, they usually meet with the minister, the priest. Hopefully they're qualified. What first happens is an asking for a description of what went on. Before the marriage, shortly, or during the engagement period, we call it. During the honeymoon, and there's a reason for that, because it's during the honeymoon that often we see a flip-flop. So in other words, if you're trying to catch someone in a sales, it's when they sign the signature that everything goes awry. Because you've got that signature, right? If you're trying to catch someone, it's during the honeymoon that they flip-flop and they become their true selves. And then shortly post-marriage. And what I want are the details of, were there any separations? How much argument went on? How much involvement of the in-laws was there? Was there any premarital sex? Was it of a violent nature? Was there any talk of precluding children? Was there an abortion? Was there all this sort of thing? Was there drug addiction, alcoholism, bipolar that you didn't recognize, things they hid that you didn't tell? Were you too young? And we're looking for these clauses at the time. Post, we're looking for them same things to come out post. We went on the honeymoon, everything was fine. We went on the honeymoon, and suddenly he starts this big fight about nothing, and the whole honeymoon is ruined, and I sat in my room and cried the whole time. Bingo, I gotta, this is a honeymoon, what the hell are you starting to fight about for? Something, and and the post-marriage where we show up for things immediately, within immediate time, such as abuse, alcoholism, drug addiction, adultery, which could have been before, adultery after is one of the causes. Immaturity. So we're looking for these things when we sit down with a person. And we ask them, without prompting them, just to describe to us the dating period, especially the engagement period, the day of the wedding and the post days of the wedding, and then shortly after the wedding. And in there, I should be able to discover the details and help them say, well, didn't you see this? Didn't you understand this? Didn't you recognize that? And then we can help them write the annulment in such ways they can get it. Because I recognize here. Let me give you an example without mentioning any names. Someone came to me and they had indications that the person was not always telling the truth all along during the dating and engagement period. And certain lies, they kind of let go, but like graduating from a college they didn't graduate from. Yeah, actually, things like this. And then, at the wedding time, after the wedding, it became apparent that this person was continually deceiving this person. And things like bills that were supposed to be paid, that were never paid, that were promised they were paid. And these are grounds for annulment. It's called deception. They pretended to be someone they weren't. They pretended to do things they didn't do. And so she was able to get the annulment, the fact that she was deceived. Even when she was willingly deceived, it's still an annulment because one and both of them, in that case, would lack the ingredients for a marriage. In this case, it was in, but she was deceived. We look for things like that. We look for jail time. We look for abuse. We look for promises made, not fulfilled. We look for a lot of things. Often it's very painful, but we do look for those things. And I let the people talk. I have to, because I don't want to influence what they're telling me. What I want to do is recognize what they're telling me. And then I bring it out to them. I say, oh, do you see this? You didn't realize that, but do you see this? You know? So one lady said, you know, right after we got married, everything I did was wrong. I could never do anything right. And if we had guests over, you always had to humiliate me. You always had to make fun of me. And if we had a barbecue, my steak was always dropped accidentally on the ground. And I realized, you know, I said, do you understand what's going on here? This is a case of serious abuse, and you have a right to file on these abuses of your person as a woman that he never really intended to marry. He intended to marry someone he could abuse and make fun of and all that sort of thing. And it was constant and consistent. And they got the annulment, you know. That's what we look for. It sounds silly sometimes. It's very serious other times, especially when you get into murders and threats of murders and all that sort of thing. But these are the grounds we're looking for. Psychological maturity, inability to make a bond, to make a commitment, immaturity of age is an easy one. These are the things we're looking for. Not wanting children, you know, that's one of the great ones, because there are three elements, right? The one flesh, the total and self-gift, and open the children.
I have a couple questions, but what if the person, like you gave your X or Y, that example, what if the person became addicted during the marriage? So it wasn't before?
No, yeah, that's the person who gets hit with the beam at work.
Okay, so unless they're accidentally disabled or whatever, or.
If they take up an addiction post-marriage, difficulty will get the annulment.
Okay.
They're very difficult, because at the time of the marriage, they were not addicted, right?
Right.
Now, you can show me they had a proclivity addiction, and we do admit that people can be born of other people, and therefore have a proclivity, or a tendency towards. It's possible, but it's gonna be difficult. So in other words, children of smokers tend to smoke, children of alcoholics tend to drink. That's not absolutely scientific, but it's getting more and more scientific. It's almost proven. Yeah.
I have another question. So when you talk about like the procreation, if somebody can't have a child, they're not preventing it on their own.
That's right.
So-
Exactly. The difference.
Okay.
That's the manipulation. Put that on the spring talks. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. The difference is not from stopping what could happen. It can happen, therefore, okay? But when I am fertile and you are fertile, and I or you and both of us put a stop to it, you have a serious problem.
Okay. What if, so like in a marriage, so if somebody were to withhold that information that they couldn't have a child, that would be, but another person wanted children and they didn't know that, that would be grounds for annulment. Because somebody.
It would be.
Okay. And,
Because you withhold. One of the questions we ask before marriage is there any information from the past or the present that you're withholding, that if your bride or your groom would know it, would make them change their minds about marrying you? I.e., I have a husband in Peru or a wife in Poland. Is there any information? That's a very serious one. I'm addicted to drugs is a very serious one. I have bipolar is a very serious one. My whole family is manic depressive. If you didn't notice it beforehand, I'm telling you, that would be very serious. Yes, these are informations that if you're withholding will automatically invalidate.